Hey guys, and welcome back to another brand new Attack on Titan video. And in today's video, it's going to be a super long video because I'll be reading the whole interview with Mr. Hajime Isayama from the official Attack on Titan guidebook. Yes, I have already talked about this interview before, but this time we have a way better explanation on why he chose to reply with this one specific answer. So since it is a long video, I would like to make things interesting for you guys. So I'll be putting 5 random hashtags throughout the video, and if you manage to find all 5 of them and comment it down below in the comment section, I'll be actually giving you a huge shout out in my next video. Obviously, I'm not Mr. Beast, I can't give away money, but I'll be surely giving you a huge shout out in my next video. So it's only for fun, but without further ado, let's just go on and get straight into the video. After overcoming many difficulties, Attack on Titan has finally reached its conclusion. Let's review the happy and painful things we have experienced during the 11.5 years of work. Congratulations on conclusion of Attack on Titan. How do you feel now that you have finished the last chapter? Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, I'm still working on the volume, so I don't really know what a life without deadlines is like, but now that the last chapter is out, I feel like I'm at peace. Disclaimer that this interview is actually before the release of Attack on Titan manga volume 34, so that's why he is saying he is still working on the volume, but for now they have finally released the Attack on Titan manga volume 34, so he is finally free. Huh? What's in there? The first idea I drew for the final chapter had the last page divided into 5 panels, but I had the feeling it wasn't quite right. At that time, the final page was the same scene as the cover of the last volume, with 3 of them running towards a tree in the hills. After meeting with the editor Kawakubo, we decided to change it suddenly, and while we were putting it in the drawing, we revised the name to the version that appeared in the May issue of Bessatsu Shonen magazine. In Bessatsu Shonen magazine, the limit is 51 pages, but in the volume, I can add 8 more pages, including the extract pages, which is the fake preview. So in the version that will be included in the volume, more pages can be added, so the volume version has more addition and correction. And the last part of the story that was not drawn in the Bessatsu Shonen magazine has been drawn. Looks like it's going to be a must-have final volume for the fans. I heard the series has run longer than originally planned, and Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, it's because the number of characters has increased. The most difficult thing is to complete the story of each character in its entirety. It will be a realistic way to express the life of a character who marries or dies in the end of the final chapter. And it's easy for the author not to have to draw out the character's later life story. That's why I couldn't end Attack on Titan without bringing down the curtain on each character's drama. Over the course of the series, were there any characters that you didn't expect to be developed? The story of Eren, Mikasa, and Armin has already decided beforehand. Eren's scene in the last chapter was the scene I came up with while I was drawing. I really liked the bad Eren, and being able to draw that scene gave me the feeling Eren is back. Crying and asking Mikasa to love him was an awkward moment, but as a guy, I could understand how he feels. Well, do you ever think about the characters who died during the story? And Isayama replied with, from the author's point of view, even if a character dies in the middle of the story, you can always reintroduce him or her into the story using the flashback method, so I don't feel that they are dead. For example, if I were to depict the world after the fairy tale, all the characters will be dead. If I depict the past, they may not have been even born yet. So it's all matter of how you perceive the characters, and I don't think that they are really dead. Sensei's own growth influenced this story. There are various characters in Attack on Titan. In a sense, they are Isayama Sensei's alter egos, but aren't characters sometimes created who think completely differently from you, Isayama Sensei? And he replied with, after all, a character is something inside you, and a character are like an alter ego that comes out of an author's inner self. Whether they are good or bad, when I draw characters arguing with each other, I feel as I am discussing with them because they both make understandable points. The discussions are interesting. Are there any scenes that particularly impress you? And he replied with, the scene where Kaya and Gabi argue in chapter 109 Guides is special. I wanted to express the difference in their point of view. Next up, Gabi refers to inhabitants of of parties as the devil of the island, isn't that right? And Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, Gabi thinks that the inhabitants of the island are the devils of the island, and that everyone who lives there here is the same. And Kaya, for her part, has recently learned that there are other countries where people live besides Paradise Island, but she still doesn't know or understand it. That's why she doesn't understand Gabi's use of the word category. Gabi, who speaks of many people as one, and Kaya, who recognizes each other with each person as an individual, can't talk about each other properly. What about Lina, who was the main character in the Marley arc? What do you think of him? Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, in Reiner, I depicted him suffering from a sense of guilt by making him bear all his sins. But in the end, Reiner, who made the irrevocable act of destroying the wall and Shiganshina district, is tormented by his sin. But he is able to repair his relationship with John and the others to the point of where they hate and beat each other. I wanted to portray as Reiner as a human being, including the inconvenient parts of from other perspectives. Although he committed a crime, Reiner's life didn't end there, did it? Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, I wanted to portray Reiner that way because I got married while I was working on the series, which was probably an important factor. Before I got married, I was naive enough to think that as long as I drew Attack on Titan, I would be forgiven for my lack of social skills. But after I got married, I had to interact with my wife's family, cook and clean my room, and do many other things besides drawing manga. I can be negligent. If I had not married, I would be probably still feel like a high school student, and I think my mental growth has influenced my work in some way. Did these changes in your environment also affect the way you drew Eren and Mikasa? And Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, that may be true. When I drew chapter 50, the editor in charge Kawakubo said to me, I thought they were going to kiss. Then I replied with, I'm embarrassed to make them kiss in a situation like this, but it's just because of that time I didn't know how to draw them afterwards if they kiss. No, I'm sure that's what Mikasa wanted to do, but now that I think about it, I was too shy to make that step. There was a kissing scene in chapter 138, A Long Dream, just before the final chapter, and the final chapter also included a kinda episode of Eren's love story. And Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, I'm fine with the fact that the kiss they refrained from chapter 50 turned out to be a pretext for the final chapter. So what exactly has changed in your mind? That's unknown, but when you read it again after a few years, you might find something you feel or understand. But as the series continued, didn't that unfounded trust turn into confidence? Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, it did. I have always felt there's a feeling inside me that can't be taught to others. I think that feeling is really suited to draw manga, and I've come to think about it as I have continued with the series. Until I was in the upper grades of elementary school, I used to play dolls with my friends, and when we play with the dolls, we would improvise stories as we went along. Since then, I often found the improvised stories were connected to the previous ones by chance. The reason Gabi, who killed Sasha, was later taken in Sasha's family and became involved with Kaya was because the story was connected to my sense of playing with dolls. Does that mean the story is connected in a way you didn't intend? Isayama replied with, yes, that's right. The main part of the story and the story of Eren, Mikasa, and Armin were decided beforehand, but the details of the story and the action of the other characters were decided as the series progressed. At that time, the materials to build the story began to walk on their own and suddenly led us to other story. That feeling used to come to me every day before the deadline for each chapter, but when I was working on volume 4, I didn't get that feeling at all, and I said to myself, oh, it didn't show up. Laugh. Huh? What did you do then? And Isayama replied with, I had a hard time writing the story, but in the 11.5 years of work that the series lasted, there were only a few times that the feeling didn't show up. The first stage of my career was a struggle against loneliness. The series began in 2009, and the following year Attack on Titan became a trending topic among the manga readers. At that time, what did you think about the situation? Isayama replied with, even now, I often read readers' comment on the internet, but when I started the series, I probably went through all the comments on the internet so vigorously that I read them all. But after a certain point, the number of comments suddenly increased to the point where I couldn't read them all. The number of posts on the net by readers became the barometer of popularity, isn't it? Isayama answered with, after that I had many important events as a mangaka, such as the Attack on Titan exhibition and TV anime series, and I always worried whether I was aware of reality. I felt like I was being swept up in some kind of an unfathomable current, and I couldn't help myself. I felt like I was being left behind. Didn't you find it difficult not to get carried away by it? Mr. Hajime Isayama replied with, however, even though the manga I was drawing was popular and I was making enough money to live on, I still had a complex in my mind that I was not a good person, and that didn't make me feel happy. When I'm walking down the street in the middle of the night, there are times when I feel inferior, like I'm a useless, helpless, lowly creature, and to cheer myself up, I sometimes mutter, no, I'm a genius mangaka. So when did that happen? Isayama says it was after volume 9. It was a time when I didn't have many friends, and the only ones I had were the 2 assistants I worked with. After that, I moved to a new office and got a lot of assistants. I got to know people like Kohei Nagashi and Yusuke Nomura who draw manga for Weekly Shonen magazine, and my daily life became more and more enjoyable. Until then, I must have felt very lonely. So moving to a new place was a turning point for you, and Isayama says, I was happy that I was able to deepen my relationship with the assistants as a fellow mangaka. In the beginning, we were all in our 20s, but now some of the assistants are married and have children, and we have become a family. So the next topic is talking about the Marley arc. Oh no, I felt that with Marley arc. So I heard that you had a hard time overcoming those difficulties to get Marley arc. Isayama says, as for non-creative aspects, I remember that when I was working on volume 23, Eren and his friends didn't appear at all, which made it difficult for me to gain popularity among readers. Long before the start of Marley arc, it had been decided that the beginning of Marley arc would be without Eren and the Survey Corps. So as the Marley arc approached, my anxiety grew, but when I actually started drawing it, I finally faced the reality and thought, oh no, I was so nervous, but in order to reintroduce Eren as an enemy, I couldn't change the development I had planned, and I was in a difficult situation at that time. In chapter 91, The Other Side of the Ocean from Marley arc, which was drawn in the midst of that struggle, there was a spectacular battle scene in which titans and modern weapons clash. It was a chapter with an impact befitting a new development. Isayama says, in fact, the most fun I've ever had drawing manga was in the battle scenes, when I was in state of full concentration and energy. Speaking of battle, I remember feeling a great sense of accomplishment in chapter 44, as I was able to fully depict the attack and defense of my favorite martial arts techniques. After chapter 44, I didn't draw any battle between titans at all. Yes, I had fun drawing the final chapter. Towards the end of the story, the feeling of it's finally over became greater, and I felt a different kind of energy. This is the last chapter of your first full-length series as a mangaka. Were you enthusiastic about the project? He replied with, it was a hard time for me because I had to sit and draw with my hands for more than 2 weeks. But in the end, I was surprised to discover that I had more energy and that I could even enjoy drawing. During serialization, the writing process must have been routine. In the final chapter, I didn't feel like I was in a routine. I was drawing what I wanted to draw, and it was really fresh, so I enjoyed it. By the way, after the final chapter meeting, Kawakubo asked me to take a picture with him. At that time, I knew for the first time that the sound button on my smartphone could cut my shirt. That photo shoot was catalyst. When all the work for the fan chapter was finished, I took a picture with all my assistants, and that remains as a very good memory. As for the memories of the work itself, isn't the TV anime adaptation a big memory? Isayama says TV anime adaptation can be called another Attack on Titan, and there are many people who got to know the work by watching that version. Also, it was interesting to see how the director and voice actors took the characters out of my hand in a good way and made them start to move as independent life for the first time as a mangaka. In the 139th chapter up to the final chapter, which is your favorite scene? And he replied with, as far as drawing go, I like the scene in chapter 104 where the Jaw Titan is scratching the Attack Titan. I felt I couldn't draw any more drawings like this. That's why I didn't draw many action scenes with Titans after chapter 104. And yeah, I can agree with that one statement because the panel actually looks amazing. So if you had to pick the best chapter, what would it be? And he replied with, the first one for me is chapter 71, Bystander. I think it was able to achieve more than I was capable of that time. I like it because it is not to Attack on Titan in the sense that it focuses on the life of a character who is not involved into the main story. Next to it is chapter 69, Friends. Is also a story about the life of a character. That's my favorite chapter too. I was like, I'm a bit of an adult now. When I was drawing the chapter, I usually continue the main storyline every time I read. But for chapter 69 and 71, I felt as if each one of them was a separate story. Now let's move on to the new topic. Eren's actions are the worst way to act. During the 11.5 years that the series has been running, did you thinking about the work change at all? And he replied with, until now, gender difference have been portrayed as something that doesn't exist. However, in depicting Marley's more modern army, including the presence of female soldiers without explanation, as in the case of Paradise Island, would have made the image appear too advanced, and I think that would have been very uncomfortable. As for as portraying an immature era, I couldn't portray female characters in the military's upper echelons, as if there was no actual history of women being treated unfairly. It's a story about a fictional world, but I thought it would be irrelevant if it was not connected to reality in some way. The lead up to the final chapter was also shocking, especially with Eren, and he says, I've been checking reactions about that part. All their honest impressions are correct. The way I drew it could be interpreted that Armin approves the slaughter, and no wonder. The way I drew it was immature. Armin did not approve Eren's worst action at all. However, he benefited from the massacre regardless of his intention. Armin wanted to say goodbye to Eren, whom he could never understand, and tell him that he was also an accomplice with his harsh words. Thank you for being a mass murderer for our sake. In the last part of the story, I realized that the theme was too difficult for me to draw, and I really regret that I couldn't express it in my drawing properly. After 11.5 years of work, when I finished my last manuscript, I really thought that I would be able to make everyone happy, but I think I was overconfident. I'm sorry for those of you who supported me and I let you down in the end. Here is a new topic. What I want to do now that I'm done with this series is, so what kind of work is Attack on Titan for you? Isayama says it's a work of slightly delayed youth, or rather, a work filled with third of my life. It was a painful time, but one that I wouldn't normally experience, and one that I'm still thinking it's not real. Thank you very much for the 11.5 years of work. Now please give a message to all the fans who have been watching over the series and hear what he says. I have been able to connect with more people than I could ever hope to through the enormous amount of message, of encouragement and support I receive on a daily basis through my work Attack on Titan. No, I have been able to connect with more people than any person could ever hope to. It was something I could never have experienced if I had lived a normal life, and I'm so happy to have spent such precious time with you, my readers. In fact, there is something I want to do more than plan my next work, and I can't wait to walk around a not so fashionable town in the middle of the day in a warm weather with a cup in my hand. I think that's what freedom is. And that's basically it for today's video. I am finally done with this video. I literally took a lot of time, a lot of effort into editing and recording this video. Oh, I am finally free. Thank you very much for watching this video, and if you actually watch until this part, thank you very much for watching until the end. And if you guys actually managed to find 5 of them, please do comment it down below right now, because only the first person who comment it will be getting a huge shout out in my next video. But that being said, thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe and like, and I'll see you guys in the next Attack on Titan video. Goodbye.